Old K didn't mention Xiao Xuan's astonishing speed of progress to anyone. And based on his observation of the following few days, it seemed that Kiki and the others hadn't spread it around either. So in the eyes of other people in the tribe, Xiao Xuan was merely a brave and fearless warrior, who was lucky enough to be blessed by the ancestors. Aside from that, he was just as normal as everybody else. Even Ji, who was a frequent guest of Old Key's, had no idea. Since Xiao Xuan returned with lots of game, he sent some food to his acquaintances in the tribe. Old K and Ji definitely got a big part of it, and Yi, who helped Xiao Xuan with sewing, also got her share. Also, the teacher of the orphan cave and the kids in the cave all had their own parts. Xiao Xuan had become quite proficient in stone crafting. A few days earlier, the shaman and the chief had given him some fine stone cores of high quality. Xiao Xuan turned them into a few spearheads, while Old K had finished recrafting and grinding the tooth sword. It wasn't as good looking as before, but was still sharp and could be put to good use. Could you please check it? What do you think? Xiao Xuan passed a stone spearhead to K. Old K lifted his eyelids slowly. Without holding it in his own hand, he glimpsed at it and said, "Not bad." It was very difficult to earn the evaluation of not bad from Old K. Even when some other stoneware crafters presented their works to him, Old K would ruthlessly assess their works as garbage. Compared to them, Xiao Xuan was quite proficient in stone crafting skills. Xiao Xuan put the stoneware aside and came in front of Old K and said with a chuckle, "You see, I think I have already learned a thing or two about stone crafting. You have mentioned that if I want to make progress, I should practice more, so I think, can we get started on the next stage of teaching?" Old K wasn't famous for stone crafting back in his days. He was famous for setting impressive traps. "Do you want to learn?" Old K asked in a low voice. "It's very tough." "Of course I do. I'm not afraid of hardship." Xiao Xuan nodded in a hurry. "Okay, then you can come here tomorrow morning." "Yes." "Okay, then I'm off." Xiao Xuan left after he had helped Old K to set the stone pot and chop the firewood. When Xiao Xuan left, Old K's poker face finally loosened and he began to smile. Early in the morning the next day, Old K was already waiting there when Xiao Xuan arrived Old K's place with Caesar. "Bring that." Old K pointed to a medium-sized wooden box and walked out with his cane. Xiao Xuan hastened to carry the box. It was heavy, and he didn't open it to see what was inside. Caesar was still yawning. When he got knocked on the head by a wooden cane, he bared his teeth and looked up, only to find that it was Old K, so in a hurry he closed his mouth. Unexpectedly, Old K walked toward Caesar's side. Suddenly he sat on Caesar's back, which almost pressed the unguarded wolf to the ground. Caesar twisted his waist uneasily, but got schooled by Old K's cane. In this mountain foot area, Old K was the only one that Caesar was afraid of. "To the training ground." Old K pointed out the direction with his cane. "Okay." Xiao Xuan carried the toolbox and headed that way. Caesar was 1 year old, and he was growing quickly. Often he helped Old K and Xiao Xuan lift and carry some things, so of course he could bear Old K's weight. Earlier Old K just caught him unprepared, so he almost fell. So, as Ji was chewing on a piece of meat jerky as he walked around in the morning, he saw Old K sitting on Caesar's back with his cane in his arms. Ji almost choked seeing that scene. Ji was quite familiar with Old K, he was in the same team as Old K when he got injured. Since Ji was quite idle and also had a thick skin, he would constantly come to Old K's place to spend time together. In the eyes of Ji, Old K was too prideful. When he withdrew from the hunting team due to the loss of a leg, he didn't allow others to help. In the end, he moved down the mountain and isolated himself from his old pals in order to not take their gifts. He considered the gifts as pity, so it wounded his pride. Every year when he had to go up the mountain to attend the ritual, he wouldn't ask for anyone's help either. No carrying, no lifting, no holding. He used his cane and the remaining leg to slowly move up the hill. It seemed that he was afraid of people saying that he couldn't walk. So he had to prove them wrong by his deeds. It had been the same for decades. But now, who was the one on a wolf's back? Or did he have a different opinion on different species? Did he choose not to walk on his own? Was he not afraid of being judged? Where's your so-called pride? Got eaten by Caesar. There were a few small hills covered by trees and other plants beside the training ground. Normally people would cut the timber from there. There weren't many kinds of plants, and aside from the flying stone mouse, which had strong breeding ability, very few animals lived there. Perhaps all others had died out a long time ago. Deforestation was quite normal here, so the trees were less thicker than the trees in the hunting forest. But it was sufficient for daily use, and some of these trees were as thick as buckets. Why did warriors want to hunt? The answer: in order to strategically pursue the optimum energy intake. Vegetables, fruits, grains, fish and animal meat were all in the diet of the people in the tribe. Vegetables, fruits and grains could be found among the short hills nearby, but they weren't large in quantities. While fish was added in the menu only last year, and most of it was eaten by people in the Mountain Foot district. As for the animal meat, it was the real staple food for people in the tribe. Also, it contained the most energy, especially the meat from high-level beasts. As a result, people in the tribe would hunt. It complied with the developing strategy made by the ancestors and could provide them with the need for energy as well. The senior warriors preferred high-level prey, for food that contained less energy was no help for them. While hunting, besides killing the prey by stabbing or slashing it, warriors would use all kinds of traps to help them in hunting. Good lassos and traps could be very dangerous killers who hid in the dark. Old K was a master in creating those hidden killers. After he got down from Caesar's back, Old K didn't start teaching Xiao Xuan how to make a trap immediately. Instead, he told Xiao Xuan about the things that he should be aware of. For example, how to take advantage of the environment and blend the traps with the environment. After that lecture, Old K began to make a trap. He started from the simple ones, and as he was making it step by step, he explained all the technical points in detail. Different traps had different features. There was the cave trap, crossing trap, ground trap, etc. While there were many small changes that needed to be made according to different types of prey. How large should the cap of the trap be? Should it be altered based on the girth of a prey's head? Should one use animal hair or straw rope to connect different traps? Should it be a single knot trap, or double knot trap, or composite trap? Or is there need to make a combined trap? Should one dig a hole? What about the thorn bed? Should it have a thorn bed? Although Xiao Xuan had often seen Lang Ga set a trap, but listening to Old K's explanation, he finally got to understand that Lang Ga and Old K had their own styles in setting traps. Lang Ga got his skills from his grandpa, and his grandpa was a master in setting traps. However, Old K had his own style and features. Simply speaking, the traps that Old K set were more sinister and vicious, and more likely to make an overkill. After demonstrating a few simple traps, Old K told Xiao Xuan to have a try. But, to set a trap, one needed straw rope. The straw ropes that they brought today were all used up. Are you skilled in making straw ropes? Do I need to teach you that? Making a straw rope and tying knots are both very important if you want to set up a good trap, said Old K. Xiao Xuan had a few straws at hand, and instead of answering directly, he raised a question. Do you know what's the meaning behind my name? The word Xuan. Old K paused his nodding action, for he really didn't know. People in the tribe tended to pick their names casually. For most of the times they would name themselves after whatever came to their minds first. For example, Old K named himself K randomly. Also, someone would name themselves after the things they were familiar with, or the things that they felt important. For example, Mao. And someone would use some kind of sound to name themselves, for example, Kiki. Old K lifted his eyelids, waiting for Xiao Xuan to answer his own question. Xiao Xuan shook the straw rope at hand before he moved his fingers and tightened the rope. Easily, a simple-looking knot was finished. He giggled. Don't you think that my name Xuan looks like the knot made from a straw rope? He was not lying. When he was born in his last life, his grandma was making a straw rope. Later on, when he was about to be named, the old lady found an ancient decoration. It was a tortoise shell with inscriptions on it. At the first sight, she noticed and liked the word Xuan as it was written in a distorted shape, so his grandma said, so the boy should be called Xuan. The word looks like the straw rope that we are making. While in the written language in the tribe, Xuan also looked similar to the character in his last life. So Xiao Xuan's explanation raised no doubt at all. Old K glimpsed at the knots made by Xiao Xuan, and then looked at the knots he just made. They were the ones that he had demonstrated earlier, and he only made the demonstrations once today. Among those knots, there were a few kinds of them that were designed by himself when he was hunting. They seemed to be easy to him, but with a slight offset, it would be totally different, and affect the effects of the trap later. With a single offset, those sly beasts in the forest would be able to escape. Pursuing perfect kills, Old K had very strict rules and standards towards ropes and knots, but before, he intended to teach slowly, for many learners could not manage to make a complete knot after a whole day. However, unexpectedly this kid could successfully make a perfect knot when he was only shown how just once. Old K pulled up the corners of his shaking lips, and thought, was the kid born just to learn this? That is so seeking exciting. On a small hill near the training grounds of the tribe, the trees there weren't that thick, but were dense in quantities. Fresh green leaves covered all the branches, and the bushes and grass nearby were growing wildly. In this season, all plants were flourishing. There was a little path of small stones, where people would constantly walk on. On the sides of that path, some year-old plants were at the height of people's waist. While further away, one could totally hide behind those branches and leaves without being spotted by others. Xiaoxuan held a half-arm-long stone sword in his hand, and walked on the stone path that seemed to be no different from others. It rained the previous day, and all the dirt on the grass and leaves was washed away. A faint smell of unknown flowers drifted in the air. Afar, booming sounds could be heard in the mountains. Those mountains didn't have any green at all. Compared to that, those few short hills were much quieter, and there seemed to be no danger nearby. However, Xiaoxuan tightly grasped the stone sword, looking very serious. He did not dare to be careless at all. Old K was teaching Xiaoxuan about setting traps, but the teaching method changed after only 2 days. In Old Key's theory, if you want to catch a bear, then you have to use the bear's thinking pattern. If you want to hunt down a beast, you'll have to put yourself into the beast's shoes. In other words, if you want to make a perfect trap which could kill whatever comes inside, you'll have to personally experience the profound secrets hidden behind every trap. Facing all those traps, if you couldn't see through them and take them out, you'd be in a dangerous situation in the real hunting grounds. Although Xiaoxuan felt that he was asking to get tortured himself, he agreed to follow Old Key's command and experience the deadly killers hidden behind the branches, stones, and leaves, where they weren't easy to be spotted. To be brief, Xiaoxuan was the prey himself. Xiaoxuan began to walk on that path of stone, with the stone sword tightly grasped in his hand. He glanced at the path ahead, and began to increase his pace as traces of hesitation appeared in his eyes. It was like the quiver sound from a thin tendon of some beast. It came from the right side of the path, at least 4 of them. Xiaoxuan didn't stop and kept running. He used the full strength of his feet and leapt high in the air. With a few swings of his arm, the sword was flashing left and right, and a row of snapping sounds were heard. That was the collision between the stone arrowheads and stone sword. 2 of the arrowheads were dodged by Xiaoxuan and 2 were blocked by the stone sword. At the same time that he leapt, Xiaoxuan's body was twisted in a strange but funny manner, with the head, arms and legs stretched or turned in different directions. By his gesture, no one could tell what he was planning to do next, but almost at the same time that he changed his posture, some other needles from the other side of the path missed Xiaoxuan by inches. They were shot out together with the stone arrowhead simultaneously, but without much noise. Because of the humming sound earlier, most people would tend to guard against the right side immediately because of the conditioned reflexes, while ignoring the more stealthy assassination from the other side. If Xiaoxuan wasn't twisted in that posture, he would have been easily shot by the needles instead, even though he avoided the attack from the stone arrowheads. Duh. 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 The hard needles pierced into the trunk of the tree opposite, and they pierced halfway into the wood. Xiaoxuan didn't land directly after he dodged the first round of attack, but grasped on the little branch spread from a tree. He was very agile on his moves, and made a flexible roll ahead. With the strength he borrowed from that small branch, he jumped over the relatively big branch which stretched above the path, without touching any leaves on that big branch. After he landed, Xiaoxuan instantly sprinted ahead, and almost right after he moved his feet, a finger-thick stone arrowhead pierced the ground where Xiaoxuan was standing a second ago. For quite a few times, the stone arrowhead nailed on the ground due to Xiaoxuan's footsteps, but Xiaoxuan kept running without being affected by those arrowheads. When Xiaoxuan was running, he didn't run along a straight route, and there was no regular pattern in his running. When he made yet another leap, he stepped on a branch nearby and pushed himself up again. During the 2 connected leaps, he dodged all the arrowheads flying in the air. Xiaoxuan rolled his wrist and 5 small stones were grasped between his fingers. He fired the stones towards the bushes ahead. At the next moment, sound of wood cracking was heard coming from down there. When dropping down, Xiaoxuan reached out his hand and gripped on the tip of a branch to alter his falling route. With one salto before landing, he made a roll on the ground to remove most of the impact. Meanwhile, he saw an arm-thick stone spike rushing at him from the corner of his eyes. A gray sword shadow flickered. The stone sword did not reflect the sunlight, but as it slashed the stone spike, a gray flash suddenly appeared in the forest. There was no metallic luster, but anyone who saw the sword would be able to feel an icy sharpness coming from it. It had only been a few breaths' time since Xiaoxuan set foot on the stone path. Looking at the path behind him, Xiaoxuan could see that there were many stone arrowheads, wooden needles and stone spikes lying on it, together with some shaking stakes and broken stones. 1 minute earlier it was just a quiet path with grass and bushes on the sides. Xiaoxuan looked up at some place nearby and asked, "How was I?" "No good." Old K sat on a piece of stone and said with a poker face. Xiao Xuan rubbed his head. I feel the same. Old K didn't have to say it, as Xiao Xuan headed back to remove and clean up all the traps set along the path, whether triggered or not. Xiao Xuan had to clear them all, or else other people from the tribe would be in danger when they walked on that path. There were also a few small holes in the ground, but they couldn't be seen normally by people. Every day, Xiao Xuan would follow this training routine, where Old K was responsible for setting the traps, and Xiao Xuan ran through them. That was a masochistic, abnormal training method, and someone with less willpower would have a nervous breakdown easily. When one became too nervous, he would become neurotic and feel that there were traps everywhere. In fact, Xiao Xuan kind of had that feeling for the first 2 days. When they returned to the tribe, he would flinch at every little bit of sound. It was totally over the top, but he got better afterwards. Old K had a feeling of relief as he stared at Xiao Xuan, who was busy clearing out the traps. Initially, he was pretty worried about whether his training method would backfire on the kid. He planned to give him guidance after 5 days of training. But out of his expectation, Xiao Xuan had already adapted himself to it before he needed to do anything. In the beginning, Xiao Xuan got wounded a lot, but soon he could narrowly dodge all the traps and keep himself safe. A little later, he could safely dodge all of them, while cutting down the connections among a few linked traps. All the changes happened in half a month. It was far beyond Old Key's expectation, but he was afraid that Xiao Xuan might become overconfident and proud, so he kept wearing his poker face all along and ruthlessly criticized once he found a flaw. Xiao Xuan removed all the things on the path and completely disassembled all the untriggered traps. He buried them all before he went over to Old K and sat beside him for his comments. In the eyes of Old K, the worst strategy to deal with all those traps was to take them head on. When you can dodge the danger, why not do so? Why force yourself to struggle so hard? Certainly, according to Old K, when facing with traps, the experts would be able to find the best breaking point immediately and use the least amount strength to break a series of traps. When finding the right breaking point of a linked trap, one could directly cut down the connections between the traps, while the greatest could use the other's traps to their advantage. The so-called defeat the enemy without a battle was saying the same thing. However, Xiao Xuan still had a long way to go. Unlike the experts mentioned by Old K, Xiao Xuan couldn't see through all the traps along the path, neither could he cut down the connections between serial traps every single time. Listening to Old Key's explanation every day, sometimes Xiao Xuan would have thoughts that perhaps he was too slow at learning. Was he an idiot? If Old K knew about Xiao Xuan's thoughts, he would be completely freaking out. Others might not be able to do the same after training 150 days, while he was thinking about doing it faster. Some of Old Key's skills now were passed on from former generations. Some were more conservative on the art of traps, while others tried to be as sinister as possible. However, they had one thing in common, which was finding the right person and passing down all their skills to the apprentice, so as to pass on the skills to the next generation. Old K looked up at the sky, cherishing his memory. Back in my days, I went through all the things that you are experiencing now, however, I did better. You were totally awesome. Xiao Xuan didn't deliberately avoid the thing about Old Key's leg, for that would hurt his old pride. Since Old K had moved on himself from the ancient injury, why should anyone else need to show him sympathy? Old K didn't need that. How long did you take to become an extreme expert? Xiao Xuan asked curiously. No, I didn't achieve that even when I was at my best. Sponsored by Nathaniel. All the residents in the Mountain Foot district knew that Old K didn't take any work in stoneware crafting anymore. People didn't know what he was doing all day, but every day, early in the morning, he would sit on a wolf's back with his cane in his arms, and only late at night would he return home. While Old K didn't have to trade for food himself, for Xiao Xuan's game was beyond enough for both of them. In Xiao Xuan's words, he was paying the tuition with the meat, and Old K didn't decline his offer after thinking about the proposal. One person set the traps, while the other made every effort to break them. Although Old K was very tired these days, he was in quite a good mood. Finally, he could practice and perform all he had learned after he left the hunting team. Although his skills weren't as good as during his days in the hunting team, they were enough to benefit Xiao Xuan after all. Seeing that Xiao Xuan got schooled by those traps and lassos every day, Old K had a good laugh. In his youth he was also being schooled that way. However, he wasn't as talented as Xiao Xuan now, and his schooling took much longer. So long, that even now, he refused to think of those days. Hence, Old K took every single minute to prolong Xiao Xuan's experience in feeling those mysterious moments. Old K knew at heart that Xiao Xuan was very talented. Perhaps after some time, all the traps he set wouldn't be able to stop him. If Old K was at his peak, he could have been able to school Xiao Xuan for longer. Alas, old K was a little upset, but not as gloomy as he used to be. "What are you sighing about?" Xiao Xuan climbed up the mountain with a face full of mud, and sat beside old K. These days old K made a few advanced traps, and in order to avoid the short arrow shots from the brushwood, he was hit in the face with a ball of mud. That mud seemed to know that he was going to present himself there at that time, and it was just waiting for him. Since Xiao Xuan had no time left to dodge it, he had to meet the mud with his face. What if it weren't mud but anything else? Xiao Xuan felt that he still had a lot to learn. For the one that got hunted, he could only be considered an expert if he could see through all kinds of traps. Being the one that hunts, one could only be considered an expert if he could set a trap that could ascertain the kill. Even so, many people in the tribe felt that learning that skill was more or less a useless option. Who would have so much time to set a trap in the hunting grounds? Everyone had to fight brutally by force. But Xiao Xuan had the feeling that perhaps it could be of great use later if he learned it now. Old K harshly criticized Xiao Xuan's movements earlier, and then looked at him to check his response. He noticed that Xiao Xuan was thinking hard while he stared at the trap zone beneath. Old K felt comforted seeing that Xiao Xuan didn't get upset or reluctant because of his criticism. Even though Old K was making harsh comments all the time, deep down at heart he was worried that Xiao Xuan might have some problems with him. It was rare for him to find such a young talent with all his skills. If Xiao Xuan quits halfway, Old K would be vomiting blood out of his chest. Old K told Xiao Xuan that he back in his days did better than him, and it was only because that he had been learning more than 100 days. However, it had only been less than 20 days since Xiao Xuan started learning, less than 20 days. Xiao Xuan was still thinking about Old K's comments earlier and compared Old K's comments to his own movements. When Old K felt something and looked at somewhere on the hill. There was no one there a minute ago, but now, someone was standing right there. It was Ta, the team leader of Xiao Xuan's hunting team, also the true-born son of the chief. He was one of the few senior totem warriors in the tribe, and a candidate for the next chief election. Old K recognized him with one glimpse. Old K did not have much connection with Ta. At his peak, Ta was merely a junior warrior, just as Mao now. When Old K quit from the hunting team, Ta was only a group leader in one of the hunting groups. However, Old K had heard the stories from some old pals that Ta didn't value setting traps at all. And he was even more so after he entered the advanced group. Only a few warriors in the advanced group knew a thing or two about setting traps, and there was no expert at all. They were of two different opinions, and people holding different opinions could hardly be friends. So Old K had no good impression of Ta all the time. And Ta wasn't looking at Old K in a friendly way either. Originally, Ta planned to recruit Xiao Xuan into the advanced group. Of course it was just an attempt. He thought that since Xiao Xuan was under the protection of the ancestors, he should have the good luck blessed by the ancestors. Wouldn't taking Xiao Xuan into his hunting group increase their chances of a successful hunting mission with loads of things to harvest? Since last year, the hunting results for Taz's hunting team had a sharp drop. Although Taz's team would bring back many ferocious beasts after every hunting mission in the eyes of the public, in fact, they hadn't finished lots of their tasks. Regarding the achievements, Taz's teams wasn't as good as the other hunting teams. The team leaders of both hunting teams were candidates for the next chief election, and they had been competing with each other ever since. Seeing that the other side was exceeding his team for quite some time, Ta was quite anxious. This time, since the incident with the ancestors happened, he focused his attention on Xiao Xuan, who was almost the same age as his own son. Ta had heard of some of the details in the last hunting mission. The more he learned, the more satisfied he was with Xiao Xuan. At first, he assumed that Xiao Xuan was only a little bit stronger than his son, with more advanced night-seeing ability and a little bit of good fortune. However, when Kiki had tested him later, he realized that the kid was making prompt progress. Perhaps that was the reason why the shaman liked him. Ta had mentioned Xiao Xuan's fast speed of progress to no one. He asked Kiki and Tuo to keep it a secret as well. Even if there was no clear rule that prevented newly awakened warriors to join the advanced group, they would normally choose some senior warriors with more experience in hunting missions. They would be able to protect themselves if anything happened. Truly there was no precedence of recruiting a newly awakened warrior into the advanced group. The next hunting trip was approaching, and Ta planned to discuss with the shaman these days and recruit a newly awakened warriors into the advanced group. Although there was no clear rule, he had to ask first. As for the chief was his father. Of course he would be on his son's side. Naturally, the chief wouldn't be an obstacle there. He heard that Xiao Xuan was training in here these days, so he came to check on him. However, he found that Xiao Xuan was merely learning about setting traps with some old guy who quit from the hunting team. It was such a waste of his talent. Such a disappointing thing. As Ta and Old K were judging each other with unfriendly looks, Xiao Xuan came back from his meditation. Hey. Ta looked along Xiao Xuan and Old K's sights, and found that the wolf labeled by the shaman was running up the mountain from below. He was running happily. Who would think that he was a wolf? He was so lame compared with the wolves in the forest. Ta had no appreciation for Caesar. In his perspective, it was better to chop it and feed it to the people in the tribe, or he would just waste more food if he was kept alive. The more he thought about it, the more dissatisfied he became. Ta felt that Xiao Xuan had many things that he didn't approve of. If he weren't seeking for the ancestors' blessing, he wouldn't allow Xiao Xuan to join the advance group, even if Xiao Xuan grew into an excellent mid-level warrior. At the other side, Xiao Xuan didn't care for other people's opinions, for he was busy being happy about his training for Caesar. Caesar cheerfully ran to Xiao Xuan with a palm-sized animal skin bag in his mouth. He placed the bag in front of Xiao Xuan, and sat down next to him, waiting to be praised. Good job. Xiao Xuan praised him generously, and tossed him a long-prepared beast's meat as his reward for getting the task done. What are you doing, Xuan? Old K was curious. Xiao Xuan poured out a few fruits from the animal skin bag, and then collected the bag into his pocket. He smiled. There's a saying that a good hound serves as the eyes and ears of the hunter. I'm trying to train Caesar into a good hound. Perhaps he would be able to help in the hunting missions later. Ta was about to leave disappointedly, but at that word, he stopped in his tracks and kept listening. Good hound. Old K was confused. Even the slyest fox couldn't escape from a hound's nose, said Xiao Xuan. Hound? Asked Old K. Ta was paying attention to Xiao Xuan's explanation too. He felt pretty interested in taking advantage of the wolf's sense of smell. Hound. It's a trained wolf. Xiao Xuan was training Caesar, and he taught him to find things by smell. At first it was clothes, then bones, and fruits afterwards. Now, Xiao Xuan wanted to ask Caesar to find something with even fainter smell. Wolves have sharp nose. Xiao Xuan smiled. The shaman taught you that. It is a good method. Old K said without much interest. At Old K's words, Xiao Xuan responded with a single and gave no further explanation. In fact, he would love to bring the scene depicted on the walls of the orphan cave back to life. However, since someone deliberately covered it up with stone powder, Xiao Xuan chose not to reveal the secret easily. Before he left the orphan cave, he painted a layer of stone powder on the fresco when the other kids were fishing outside. The window of that stone room was blocked as well, and no one had noticed that. When they had enough rest and were about to head back home, Xiao Xuan glanced at where Ta was standing earlier and sneered, before leaving with Old Key's toolbox in his hand. Xiao Xuan was about to have his second hunting trip. Even though he wanted to work on Old Key's newly invented serial traps, he did not have enough time to spend on placing traps and ropes. It was close, but time was limited. It had been 19 days since the other hunting team left, and they would be back in a few days. Now, all the warriors in Xiao Xuan's hunting team were preparing to set off. It would be the second hunting trip that Xiao Xuan would take part in, and the third hunting mission this year. According to the traditional standards within the tribe, there would be more newly awakened warriors hunting this time around. In order to look after those new warriors during the mission, there would also be more experienced warriors tagging along with the team as their guardians. Because of this, Xiao Xuan anticipated that there would be about 50 more warriors in the hunting team than last time. In case you're confused, it's the third hunting trip for his team, not counting the other team. For example, Sai, who used to have a problem with Xiao Xuan, and Sai's father, who had missed the past few trips in order to train his son, would join this hunting mission. Luckily, many residents in the Mountain Foot district, who were unable to store as much food as people in the mountainside or mountaintop, were able to go fishing. Hence, they had to focus their attention on those fish in the waters. Even though the energy the fish contained was not comparable to beasts from the forest, it could at least keep the residents from starving. Old K did not ask Xiao Xuan to go to the training ground anymore, for Xiao Xuan had to use these last few days to craft more pieces of stoneware to be used. The stone cores all came from the shaman and the chief as gifts for his great deed in finding the ancestors. Naturally, the stoneware crafted from them would also be of fine quality. Perhaps Caesar also sensed that Xiao Xuan was about to leave, as these days he followed Xiao Xuan closely everywhere, and sometimes he would even act like a spoiled child, with his nose and head clung to Xiao Xuan's hands. Xiao Xuan was not sure whether it was an illusion or not, but he felt that after feeding Caesar the meat of ferocious beasts over the last 10 days, Caesar had grown much bigger and stronger than before. Caesar liked the meat of ferocious beasts very much and was especially fond of the thorn black wind meat. After eating these, he would refuse to eat fish sometimes. Well, he grew picky. There was still a lot of meat remaining in his cabin, so Xiao Xuan took most of it over to Old Key's place. It should be sufficient for them to eat for over 10 days, allowing Xiao Xuan not to worry about the man and the wolf's food while he went on the hunting mission. As Xiao Xuan was communicating with Old K about which traps fit what kinds of ferocious beasts, he heard someone calling his name from outside. Old K nodded towards the door, indicating that Xiao Xuan should go and have a look. Xiao Xuan lifted the curtain and found that Tuo was standing outside the door. He came without Kiki this time. I went to your cabin earlier, and no one was inside as I expected. You're here instead. Tuo waved at Xiao Xuan. The shaman asked for you. Old Key's eyelids twitched, and he stopped the work at hand. Since the shaman asked for him, there was no reason for stalling. Xiao Xuan told Old K about it and told Caesar to go inside while he followed Tuo up to the mountaintop. They were about to set off for the next hunting mission. Why did the shaman summon him now? He came to the same stone room where he was questioned about the ancestors after the memorial ceremony. It was the shaman's guest room, and normally all conversations happened there. The team leader Ta was standing right outside the stone room, and he showed a rare smile upon seeing Xiao Xuan. Tuo did not enter the room, and the shaman was waiting inside alone. He sat on a straw mattress with a smile, looking extremely gentle and kind. However, if you took a closer look, you'll surprisingly find out that it was totally impossible to expect what he was about to say. Seeing Xiao Xuan come, the shaman pointed to another straw mattress in front of him, indicating Xiao Xuan to sit. After a proper salute, Xiao Xuan sat down with his legs crossed, waiting for the shaman to start the conversation. The shaman looked at Xiao Xuan in silence, not eager to say anything. Xiao Xuan kept waiting in silence, as well. He was in no rush, for he was prepared to wait. A short while later, the smile on the shaman's face grew clearer, and he opened his mouth slowly. Show me your totem patterns. Xiao Xuan had prepared for that when he saw Ta at the door, so he was not surprised the slightest bit. As he urged the totem power inside him, immediately totem patterns began to reveal on his face. Meanwhile, the totem patterns climbed on his uncovered shoulders and arms, and the patterns passed his shoulders for over the length of a palm. Seeing the totem pattern on Xiao Xuan's upper arm, the shaman nodded. Impressive, indeed. No wonder Ta asked for to have you join his hunting group. The advance group. Xiao Xuan had hopes, but since he had heard from Lang Ga and the others that it was more than difficult to be selected as a member of the advance group, he felt that he would not be chosen as one of them because he was just awakened this year. However, unexpectedly, that was really why he was summoned by the shaman. Xiao Xuan had no idea what the difference between the advance group and other hunting groups was. Only those in the advance group knew what the tasks were, no one else. However, according to Lang Ga and the others' gossip, the advance group had their own extra tasks. No matter what, there was no denying that the advance group would encounter more trouble. The things that happened in the normal hunting group was messy enough for Xiao Xuan. He knew himself well. Even though he was making much faster progress than others, he was still a junior totem warrior who had awakened only this year. Was Ta not afraid that he would be a liability that holds the advance group back? What were they thinking? These people. I don't think that I have such capability. Xiao Xuan said. Indeed. Normally all warriors in the advance group would be mid-level warriors or almost mid-level warriors. You are not. However, Ta values your capability and he came to me personally to recruit you into his hunting group, said the shaman. Valued my capability. What kind of capability? Xiao Xuan was confused, but he figured it out soon enough. Why did the people in the tribe envy Xiao Xuan very much? Because of the blessings of the ancestors. Seeing that Xiao Xuan kept his silence, looking puzzled, the shaman continued, you needn't worry. No one will force you if you do not want to join the advance group. As for Ta, I'll turn him down for you. When he was about to decline the offer, he hesitated while thinking about something. Are there more benefits for people in the advance group? Xiao Xuan had discovered that there were some advantages for the elite group in the tribe. Aside from some advantages that are common to all in the tribe, people of higher ability would be able to receive more preferential treatments. Also, the leadership of the tribe would be glad to offer them more help. Benefits. Yes, for example, Tuo had better herbs. The shaman smiled at Xiao Xuan's words. Of course there are more benefits. Every single warrior in the advance group would be assigned a pack of fine herbs when hunting. It could further stimulate the healing ability inside a warrior, hence to accelerate the process of healing. Is the pack of herbs distributed ahead of time? Xiao Xuan asked. It will be distributed to the people one day before the hunting. All herbs were distributed by the shaman, and only the shaman knew how to mix the herbs properly. Xiao Xuan sat still and said quite seriously, "It's an honor for me to gain the team leader's acknowledgement. Of course I would be glad to join the advance group. There's no reason for declining." The shaman was totally speechless. "Then why were you making a complex expression earlier?" "It's just," Xiao Xuan showed a little embarrassment, "can I take another kind of herb?" "Another kind? You may easily get wounded during a hunting mission, and the speed of healing would be essentially important. Without the healing herbs, you would be exposed to danger and much higher odds," said the shaman. "I know. But can I have another kind of herb?" The shaman felt a little complicated, for he had never met anyone else with such thick skin at a young age. Certainly, the shaman had already known a thing or two about Xiao Xuan's thick skin, so facing Xiao Xuan's request, he was only slightly surprised, but not so perturbed. "So what do you want?" The shaman was still in an eased tone. "Health recovering herbs, do you have any?" He was asking those kind of herbs for Old K. Based on his performance when setting traps, one could easily find that Old K's ability was falling short of his wishes. He was getting old fast. Due to stone crafting for a long time inside the room, he caught some occupational diseases. Healthy warriors of course could heal and have those pains relieved by their tough physiques, but Old K could not do the same. Xiao Xuan could constantly hear his subdued coughing. For most of the year, Old K would lock himself in the dim room of his, crafting stoneware. He was not as tough as before, having lost one of his legs, and most of the food he traded for, with the stoneware, was the meat of inferior beasts or other animals. Yet Old K was a mid-level warrior back in those days. The energy contained in inferior food would never be able to meet up with his needs. As time went by like that, the strong body of this mid-level warrior degenerated as well. It seemed that Old K was getting older much faster than the others. Now since Xiao Xuan was able to join the hunting team, he didn't worry about the meat issue anymore. However, after suffering from chronic illness for so many years, Old K could use some herbs to nurse himself back to health. Normal herbs might not work, so Xiao Xuan wanted to take some more effective herbs from the shaman. The tribe had a tradition of elite preferential treatment, so normally all good stuff would be distributed to only those who were the elites. Other warriors had no access to fine herbs, for after all, they were hard to obtain and limited in quantities. This time, since Xiao Xuan had the chance for being considered as an elite, he planned to take advantage of that. Ta had raised the proposal. Even if Xiao Xuan declined him this time, he would be facing a second round after all. That team leader was not someone that easily gave up. Xiao Xuan knew at heart that even if he could not be of great help to the mission, he would be kept safe by Ta, for Ta wanted him only for the reason that he was blessed by the ancestors. Ta would definitely try his best to ensure his safety. What's more, Xiao Xuan figured that if this time's hunting result was still not good enough, he would be kicked out of the advance group, and then his next opportunity in rejoining would not come by so easily again. However, Old K was getting older and weaker as every day went by. This was an incredible opportunity. When the shaman was having the conversation with Xiao Xuan inside the guest room, Ta waited patiently some distance away from the stone room. He could not hear the talk, but he knew that the shaman would surely reject his proposal if Xiao Xuan refused to comply. After a while, Xiao Xuan came out and left with an animal skin bag in his hand. Ta entered. "He chose to join," said the shaman. Ta felt quite happy about it, and as he looked up to express his gratitude, he saw the shaman's old cloudy eyes. It seemed that the shaman's eyes were just like normal, but Ta felt an enormous psychological pressure. He sensed that the shaman was angry, and all his anger was on him. Ta dared not continue to look at the shaman, so he looked down again, and made a sincere salute to him. "Please trust me. I'll bring him back, safe and sound." The shaman said nothing but waved his hand to let Ta leave. After he left the stone room, Ta wiped his forehead and found a handful of sweat. The shaman gave Xiao Xuan a pack of herbs which could help with health recovery, but also allowed him to get the herbs for healing injuries. He told Xiao Xuan to go to Ta's place one day before the hunting trip to get them. It was not a large pack, but there were quite a few kinds of herbs that were extremely hard to find. So Xiao Xuan did not get much, but according to the shaman, it was 10 days dosage. If he returned safely, he would still have further opportunities, even if he got kicked out from the advance group and rejoined his former hunting group. Also, he could try to trade for the herbs with the shaman without being a member of the advance group. However, he decided to wait for the effect of the herbs. Xiao Xuan didn't know whether Old K would get better after taking them. The second hunting team returned at the 21st day of the hunting trip, with 3 warriors badly injured and 1 being unaccounted for. Being missing meant that he must have died already, and his remains were nowhere to be found. Apparently this time the hunting team had encountered big trouble, however the game they brought back aroused the people's excitement. Aside from the relatives of the dead and the injured, all folks from the warriors' family shouted out loud and cheerfully. They won't have to worry about the food for the next 20 days. At dusk, Tuo came to Xiao Xuan's cabin to deliver him a message. Xuan, you should go to the team leader's place to fetch something for the hunting trip tomorrow. We'll set off the day after tomorrow. Okay, got it. Thanks. Tuo did not enter the room, for he had to notify a few other warriors who were on patrol. Xiao Xuan looked outside the window, and found that the night swallows were already quite active at that time. Almost all the people in the Mountain Foot district returned to their own homes. But unlike the times before, this time some of the kids in Mountain Foot district got to go on their first hunting trip. Naturally they were quite excited. During daylight they were busy with training, while at night, they would just roar their excitement out. Xiao Xuan closed the window and then set out the few stone arrowheads that he crafted today. It said that the advance group would go deeper in the forest to do the hunting, where it would be much more dangerous. However, Xiao Xuan had no idea what the difference was exactly. More ferocious beasts. Or something else. Given the game that the advanced force brought back was almost the same kind, Xiao Xuan could not see anything special after all. The next day, Xiao Xuan went up to the mountaintop district to Taz Place, where he met a lot of warriors in the advance group. Due to the fact that there was no notice in advance, almost all the warriors in the advance group were pretty surprised to see that Xiao Xuan would be in their hunting group this time. Some of them also raised their concerns and doubts about the decision, but all oppositions were suppressed and put down by Ta. After taking that pack of mixed herbs, Xiao Xuan was kept there to meet the other warriors in the advance group. However, there was no real conversation, for they still considered Xiao Xuan as more of a kid than a warrior. Regarding the strength, Xiao Xuan was indeed the weakest, so he just faced their doubts and sneers with a slight smile. No further explanation was made. On the day that the hunting team was about to set off, Xiao Xuan dropped off Caesar at Old Key's place. Facing Old Key's concerned look, Xiao Xuan clenched his fist. Believe in me, you can just rest assured. However, Xiao Xuan's promise cracked Old Key's hope, and he was even more worried. Last time before the kids set off for the hunting trip, he said the exact words of "you rest assured," but he met the thorn black wind, and then got lost in the mountain after his survival. It said that Mai and the others' faces turned totally pale when they finally found him. What's more, he was going to tag along with the advance group this time. Didn't that mean that he would be facing more dangers? Rest assured. Rest the hell assured. Seeing Xiao Xuan's back as he climbed up the mountain with the equipment, Old K sat in front of his door, with worries and concerns filling up his mind. It was the same routine as last time, all needed to gather together before setting off, and it was required to sing the song. When Xiao Xuan came back from his first hunting trip, he paid attention to learn the song of hunting, so this time he was not pretending to sing it. The shaman glimpsed in Xiao Xuan's direction while they were singing, so as to confirm that he was not pretending to sing as he did during last time. The shaman was quite satisfied. However, even if the shaman did not stare at him, Xiao Xuan already drew much more attention from people. All warriors present were standing in the units of their hunting groups. Last time, Xiao Xuan was standing beside Lang Gao, while this time, he was standing with Tuo and Kiki. Naturally the other warriors knew Tuo and Kek's position, and that was why they were so surprised. That was the advance group. Did the kid Xuan himself ask to join? Why would the team leader agree on that? Certainly, many people were envious of Xiao Xuan's position, especially the newly recruited warriors. They all awakened at the same batch, but when they were still in training, Xiao Xuan had entered the hunting team. Now when they could finally be recruited into the hunting team, they found that Xiao Xuan was already in the advance group. Soon enough, all their jaws seemed to fall down on the ground out of shock. Even Mao, who was considered as the biggest talent this year, was not brought into the advance group by his own dad. How could Xiao Xuan be selected? The warriors did not know what the team leader was thinking, but it did not stop them from lecturing their own kids. Sai, for instance, got schooled pretty hard by his old man again. Fei was not with the team this time. When Xiao Xuan came back from the hunting mission, he kicked off Fei's ass and broke a few of his ribs. Fei lay in his bed for almost 10 days, and when he could finally get out of the door, he was beaten up by Mao. Xiao Xuan held back some strength, for he worried that Fei's families might mess around with old K, but Mao had his dad and grandpa on his back, hence he was more ruthless. So, with last time's wounds not completely healed, Fei was kicked down to the ground again. Now, he was still resting at home. Naturally he was not able to tag along. People also knew that Fei started the trouble, so none of them interfered with Xiao Xuan and Mao's revenge. Also, the team leader requested that Ah Fei and his father stayed at home, so they could reflect on it. Even healthy warriors might not be able to tag along with the hunting mission every time, for there were rules about who could go and who couldn't. All group leaders would report the name list in their hunting group for the team leader to decide. So whoever couldn't pass the team leader's final check had better be calm and stay at home. What? Not enough food stored? Then you should starve. No starving meant no lesson learned. Being the team leader, Ta already knew that the hunting result of his team was not as good as the other teams. Of course he would not endure someone ridiculous to hold the team back and give reasons to other people to make fun of him. This year, he used Ah Fei and his father as an example during all hunting missions. With Ah Fei's example as a warning, the new warriors tagging along would better behave themselves. When they walked down along the path of glory, the people on both sides were extremely excited, especially those women whose husbands and sons were in the hunting team. They were roaring like hell. Xiao Xuan looked at them, and he felt that those women were competing with their volumes. Some of them even fought each other while yelling. It was such a fine example of the people's savage characters. In the tribe, there's a tradition that all problems could be solved by violence. When they got to the mountain foot area, Xiao Xuan spotted old Kaon Caesar's back in the crowd. He waved at them, and then left with the hunting team. With last time's experiences, it was not hard for Xiao Xuan to cope with the pace. When they left the path of glory, they started to speed up and left the tribe's residential area behind. They ran faster and faster, but no one was left behind. Apparently all the newly awakened warriors had trained well in the past few days. When they left the patrolling area of the tribe, Ta told the team to stop and take a break before they enter the woods. Xiao Xuan wondered what he should do later, but after paying attention to Ta's words for a while, he realized that he had no task at all. The others all had their tasks assigned, and it was pretty clear who was about to handle which direction after they entered the forests. However, Xiao Xuan had one thing to do, which was being at Ta's side and not be a burden. Xiao Xuan acknowledged the fact that he was not as strong as the others, so he just glimpsed at those who laughed at him for still needing the protection without refuting any of them. Tuo kicked on those who were laughing at Xiao Xuan. The team leader was distributing assignments to other group leaders and paid no attention to their side, so some of the warriors became bolder. If no one stopped them, they might cross the line. Just ignore them. Perhaps you will beat them after about a decade. Tuo consoled him. It doesn't matter. Xiao Xuan looked at the few people who were still sneering, and then turned to Tuo. Is the advance group going to hunt for ferocious beasts that are more fierce and vicious? Tuo was stunned at the question, and then said something profound. Who told you that the things that we hunt for are all beasts or ferocious beasts? If not the beasts or ferocious beasts, then what would they be hunting? Xiao Xuan was perplexed, but before he had the time to raise any questions, Ta came over. Since they were the advance group, naturally they needed to set out earlier than the other hunting groups, in order to explore the way. Okay, is everybody ready to go? Ta called on the warriors in the advance group, and when they were about to move, Ta turned to Xiao Xuan. Can you keep up with me? Just don't force it. The advance group is not like other hunting groups such as Mai's. Ta meant that the advance group would be much faster in the speed, and he probably could lend a hand to help him out a little if Xiao Xuan could not keep abreast with the others. Not yet. I guess I should first give it a try. Xiao Xuan had no idea about the speed of the advance group. Although he thought that he could do it, he decided not to be overconfident. What if it turned out that he could not keep up with the others? He would be the one who's suffering from his own words. Ta kept quiet at Xiao Xuan's response, and led the warriors into the forest after giving the signal to other group leaders by gesticulations. In the blink of an eye, over 40 warriors disappeared in the verdant mountain forests. Finally, Xiao Xuan knew what it was like to be part of the advance group. Ta said that the advance group was not like other hunting groups. Xiao Xuan now realized that it was like comparing a normal electric cars with a motorcycle in full speed. He barely had the time to pay attention to the surroundings. Fortunately, Xiao Xuan made fast progress these days. His speed was really faster compared with when he had just awakened, or else he might literally fall behind of the advance group. They needed to sweep over this place in a short period of time to detect whether there were any ferocious beasts that might be dangerous to the warriors or any other variable factors. Every member in the advance group had gone towards their planned destination, so when the 40-member group entered, they broke up the whole into parts and disappeared in a second. Xiao Xuan could only see Ta and another warrior named Asuo, who was almost the same age as Tuo and Kiki. Aside from Xiao Xuan, the others were doing the scouting in a 2-warrior team. Surely they already knew the place that they were going to scout. After running for some time, Ta stopped at their rendezvous point. Later on, the other warriors would come to this place for reunion after they finished exploring. Asuo, you take care of him in here while I scout. Ta left right after he said that. The only reason that Xiaoxuan managed to follow them here was because Ta slowed down a little bit. He ordered Asuo to stay with Xiaoxuan so that he would be able to survive if there were any ferocious beasts. Meanwhile, Ta had to use the time to scout the region that he designated to himself. Asuo was quite close with Tuo, but he did not appreciate Xiaoxuan that much. Before they entered the forest, he was one of the people mocking at the kid. How could a newly awakened warrior be of any help? Based on the main leader's description, it seemed that this kid was more like a mascot. He was nothing but a lucky charm, and now someone had to stay with him for protection all along. Asuo despised that at heart, and deep down he prayed, hoping that this kid would not hold them back like Fei did. When Ta had left, Asuo paid attention to the surroundings. Since they entered the woods, he had not bothered to look at Xiaoxuan. It was very quiet, and the cry of birds and animals could be heard constantly. Originally Asuo was prepared that Xiaoxuan might be chatty and ask some stupid questions. However, after waiting for quite some time, Asuo heard no questions, even no sound was made. When he first joined the advance group, he had been curious about everything for a pretty long time. Most people would try to ask more questions whenever possible. Xiaoxuan was literally the first one that kept his silence like that. Asuo couldn't help but take a quick glimpse at Xiaoxuan when he pretended to view the surrounding situation. Quickly he looked away, but after some hesitation, he looked back again at Xiaoxuan. Even though Ta did not run on full speed since he entered the forest, the speed was much faster than the other hunting groups. Being a warrior who had just been awakened this year, it was pretty difficult for him to keep up with the team without help from the others. Back then when Asuo himself first tagged along with the advance group, he did not ask for any help either, but it took him quite some time to catch his breath while waiting at the rendezvous point. He barely recovered from the fatigue after the warriors arrived at the rendezvous point. However, Xiaoxuan was merely a little short of breath. He was not even sweating. Standing there, he still had the energy to keep guard at the surroundings, as if he was not exhausted from the running at all. Was he really a junior warrior who just awakened this year? And he came from the orphan cave down the mountain. Aren't you tired? Asuo was totally stunned. Seeing Asuo's weird glance, Xiaoxuan answered, I'm fine. In fact, Xiaoxuan was taking rapid and short breaths out of fatigue a minute ago, but he recovered fast, and the sweat had dried in the air as well. Feeling the quickly restored energy inside, Xiaoxuan could pull out some strength to pay attention to the environment. After some careful observation, Asuo realized that this kid was not struggling to act like that at all. That was odd. Seeing that Xiaoxuan had no intention to ask questions, Asuo felt bored instead. In the past, he would go exploring with Ta, however, now he had to stay and wait. This place was not so dangerous after all, so they had the luxury to have a conversation. Aren't you curious about what the advance group's tasks are? Asked Asuo. You won't answer me anyway, so why bother asking? Xiaoxuan had asked before, but Ta, Tuo, and Kiki all avoided answering directly. All they told him was, you will know when it's time. That was when we were still with the other hunting groups. Of course we wouldn't tell you then. What if you told the others? The shaman would hate if too many people knew it, however, now I can tell you if you want to know. Asuo said proudly. He assumed that Xiaoxuan was somewhat capable, so he was much nicer in attitude. When he resumed the fine attitude, he retained the old habit of his, which was blabbering about the advance group to the new recruits. Answering related questions made him feel proud of himself, especially when seeing the astonished faces of newly recruited warriors. It felt so good. We have our own tasks in the advance group, tasks directly given from the shaman. Asuo explained. It was an extremely high honor for them, and during this process, there were benefits as well. We get to eat the things that are not accessible to the others in the tribe. Also, we can be stronger than the others in the future. Xiaoxuan endured Asuo's blabbering for a while, but then he couldn't help but interrupt. So what are the tasks exactly? Asuo was a little upset for being interrupted while he was soaked in the self-pride, so he hummed, do you think that the herbs in the tribe were obtained by people randomly? The herbs. Xiaoxuan had noticed this strange thing since he got the pack of herbs from the shaman. Although he had no idea what the origin of the herbs was, he could tell that some of them smelled like plants and leaves. He had never seen anything similar in the past, even during hunting missions. So, all the time, you were hunting and killing plants? Not all the time, but yes. Said Asuo. So it was really the plants. Xiaoxuan was stunned. How could they use words like hunt and kill for plants? What kind of plants could they be? As they were talking, Xiaoxuan heard a vague sound of a whistle from afar. Later on, more whistles appeared from other locations. Some were near, while some weren't. Some of the sounds were even quite far, and could barely be heard only by paying attention closely. When the whistling sound stopped, warriors began gathering at the rendezvous point. Ta was the last person here, for he had to go back to deliver the information to the other hunting groups. They could not hear the whistles if they were too far away. After a short break, Ta led the others to continue the hunting trip. In the beginning, they were worthily the esteemed advance group. However, later on, they became the herb-collecting team in the tribe, and their tasks were assigned by the shaman. The speed of the advance group became rapid again, and the route was not the one that Xiao Xuan knew from before. They strode at a speed which was almost 2 to 3 times faster than the other hunting groups. It was a long process, during which they only had one little break to have something to eat. After that, they kept on marching, and then spent the night in a cave when the night came. It was also the place that Ta and the others had used to rest at during hunting missions. Xiao Xuan indeed was not used to this kind of running during the first day. Even though he was much better than his peers regarding strength, endurance and speed, he was only a junior warrior who awakened this year after all. In the advance group, the weakest warrior was someone only one step away from becoming an intermediate warrior. Xiao Xuan could not be comparable with them after all. So when they finally arrived at the cave to rest on the first night, Xiao Xuan was completely exhausted. He laid down there, unable to even lift his feet. All his muscles hurt while twitching, and his brain felt like it was swollen. The other warriors in the advance group were also tired, but they were already used to it, and the soreness was not the same as Xiao Xuan was experiencing now. Looking at Xiao Xuan's behavior, they all guessed that this lad could finally see the gap between him and the others. The advance group was not for everyone to join, and those with low ability could never keep up with the crew, even if he used every effort to become a part of the group. However, Xiao Xuan was already impressive enough to keep up during his first day. So, some of the warriors in the advance group had a better impression of Xiao Xuan. In their eyes, Xiao Xuan was only a kid, and people in the tribe had a relatively higher tolerance for kids. Ta and the others, ranking top in the advance group, already discussed about taking turns to carry Xiao Xuan during the next day. After all, it seemed impossible for Xiao Xuan to keep running by himself tomorrow. However, to everyone's surprise, all the others found that Xiao Xuan was as good as new when they woke up the next day, early in the morning. Last night, he was struggling to lift his toe, but now he was alive and kicking, as if nothing had happened. He needed no ride from others, and began to keep up energetically. The warriors in the advance group shared the same facial expression. Oh my goodness. Was this really the kid from the orphan cave down there? What had he been dieting on since birth? Normal beasts. Ferocious beasts. Or even king beasts. It's just impossible. The food distributed to the orphan cave was normal beast meat and plant tubers, which contained no good energy. How could he grow into such a strong warrior? They were really puzzled no matter how they scratched their heads. Milling over it, it was still very mysterious. Unless, he did have the blessings from the ancestors. Hence during the second day's run, people would constantly glance at Xiao Xuan while running. Well, judging from that kid's energetic look, it seemed that he was not faking it. Unlike the other hunting groups, which would do some hunting before journeying to the next location, the hunting pattern of the advance group was different. Ta led the group to keep running. After spending one night at the cave, they had to continue to march onward. Sometimes they had to climb over a mountain while the mountaintop was covered in perennial snow. Sometimes they had to take a detour to some other mountains afar, during which they had to pass through dangerous regions like swamps and tar pits. Xiao Xuan had seen many nameless ferocious beasts, such as huge fierce ugly beasts and colorful poisonous snakes. Any one of them would raise enough eyebrows if they carried them back on the path of glory. However, the group of warriors made no stop at all. Even when they killed something, it would be for food and daily supply. The spare parts would just be tossed away in order not to be their burdens. March, hunt, and then march, and then hunt again. They were doing similar things every day. Enormous consumption of physical energy meant more need of energy supplement. The meat from high-level beasts was the best supplement. Originally, the other warriors in the advance group worried that Xiao Xuan might be sleepy after dieting on the high-level praise meat. However, it turned out that they were worrying about nothing. After hunting down a thorn-black wind, Xiao Xuan had become used to eating high-level meat. He had been able to adapt to the food for a long time. In fact, he could absorb the energy from even higher-level foods. Being a newly awakened warrior that was awakened this year, he ate no less than the others and had much faster recovery speed. At first, warriors from the advance group were all surprised at Xiao Xuan's behavior. But later on, they became less surprised, and then they became totally numb to it. In the end, no one would ever laugh at Xiao Xuan anymore. As expected, no ordinary person would be recruited by the team leader in the advance group. After 5 days of continuous journeying, Xiaoxuan followed the others to climb up a mountain and entered a cave to rest. They had reached the destination. But Xiaoxuan could not tell the difference, except for a slight odd feeling. After a night's rest, Xiaoxuan was woken up early in the morning. He collected his equipment and followed Ta outside. They continued to climb up and then stopped at a steep cliff. The sun rose as time went by. Xiaoxuan stood at the edge of cliff, facing the rising sun. It was a large scale of endless green in his view. There were some other colors mixed in, but 99% was green in different shades. This was the destination of their journey, a kingdom of plants. In the horizon, at the junction between the sky and the endless plant kingdom, the sun was rising. The chilly air became warmer. Xiaoxuan could clearly feel that everything living on this land was waking up. Ka, ka, ka. Among this green kingdom of plants, some building tall circular plants were making ka-ka sounds, like heavy wood planks hitting each other. Sometimes there were creaking sounds, as if a giant wooden boat was swaying in the waves. Together with these sounds, the ends of the circular plants had their originally wound-up leaves unwind. The layers of leaves stretched and opened, like flowers blossoming. The lowered heads of the bean sprout like giant plants began to raise, and in the face of the sun, they stretched out their huge leaves, like wings. The sun was rising, and its light had reached the other side of the mountain. Like an alarm clock, it went from one side of the mountain to the world in the other side, to wake up the sleeping creatures. Xiaoxuan took a deep breath. He stepped forward and looked down. It was merely a cliff, and whoever jumped down would totally be smashed to pieces. How do we go down there? Asked Xiaoxuan. If they had to go down eventually, then why did they climb up? The cliff they stood on was basically perpendicular to the ground. It would be very dangerous if they climbed directly down, let alone that no one knew whether they would be attacked by other creatures while climbing down. It was an impossible mission. Of course we do not jump. Someone laughed. Hey. Look at the lake over there and you'll know. Tuo pointed to somewhere in the other direction. Xiaoxuan looked along to where Tuo pointed. What lake? There was only a lake of darkness. No. It was more than that. Xiaoxuan took a closer look and found that something was moving in the black lake. It was too far for people to notice easily. Sure enough, the black lake was not as calm as before, and it began to spread out. Numerous black dots rose up. At first there were only a few of them, but after several breaths, dense black patches began to rise up in the air. And the lake, which was covered by those black dots, finally revealed itself in Xiaoxuan's sight. It was an open lake and there seemed to be a lot of plants of different colors inside. Yellow, green, brown, red, many colors mixed in the pool, and together with the shape of the pool, it was like a pair of compound eyes, like those of some insect. The mountain on the other side was much higher than the one Xiaoxuan was standing at, and it poked right into the sky. Those rising black dots did not fly upwards, but flew in their direction, as if a ball of dancing black cloud. Get ready, everyone. Ta said to the crew and then to Xiaoxuan, you follow me, Xuan. The black cloud approached and Xiaoxuan could basically hear the wings flapping, and he finally saw what those black dots were. Dragonflies. Just before, they were too far away to identify, but now, Xiaoxuan's heart was fluttering like hell, seeing that it was a group of dragonflies. Xiaoxuan had seen dragonflies before, but not in this size and quantity. It was a huge aircraft fleet. The small ones had wingspans of at least 3 meters, while most of them had wingspans of 5 meters. Some of them were even bigger, while numerous giant dragonflies were flying towards them in large numbers. Obviously Xiaoxuan was looking at something he had never seen before. They were going to take them from one side of the mountain to the other side, where the green kingdom of plants was located. When the aircraft fleet flew above their heads, Xiaoxuan could see the reticulate veins in their wings. They were like gliders. Let's go. With the favorable terrain, warriors in the advance group leapt down the cliff and landed on the backs of dragonflies. Before Xiaoxuan had the chance to move, he was lifted by Ta and landed on a big dragonfly's back. For the first time in his life, Xiaoxuan experienced the giant dragonfly flight. Those giant dragonflies were gentle in temper, or else they would not allow the warriors in the advance group to take a ride on their backs. Judging from the behavior of the advance group, Xiaoxuan knew that this was not the first time that they used this way to go down the mountain. Also, perhaps those giant dragonflies also had vague memories about the people. However, according to Ta's theory, the dragonflies do not mind taking the others for a free ride, as long as you do not actively irritate or attack them on purpose. Viewing from the backs of dragonflies, the forests below seemed to be quite calm and peaceful. Of course that was merely an illusion. The place was even more dangerous than the forests that Xiaoxuan had crossed during his last hunting mission. The law of the jungle also applied in here. The competition for sunlight and nutrition was quite fierce in some places with dense trees. Often, Xiaoxuan would see some withered trees. Their roots were large and deep, which were obviously hundreds of years old. They had twisted roots and gnarled branches, but also very dead. There was no wormholes, no cracks on the trunks, but the tree had still died. Ta told Xiaoxuan that those were killed by the joint efforts of the other trees nearby. The battlefield of the plants was both above and below the surface. If you peeled the surface away, you could see that the roots of the dead trees had all been strangled by the roots of other trees. Attention! Prepare to get off. Ta warned Xiaoxuan. They could not keep following the group of dragonflies, for they had a different destination. After a short ride, they had to go on separate ways. The group of dragonflies was quite large, and the 40 warriors in the advance group were not together. Even if they started the ride almost at the same time, they got separated after the dragonflies changed their flying formation later. Soon they could not see each other. Now. Jump. Xiaoxuan had no time to react, because he was lifted by Ta and he jumped down together with him. The landing position that Ta chose was a giant plant that stood there like a tall building. They landed on a huge leaf near the top, for the soft leaf helped remove most of the impact. Also, Ta jumped while the dragonfly was flying low, so they weren't hurt. It was a safe landing, and Xiaoxuan finally got to stand on his own feet. The leaf beneath his feet felt cold, but not slippery. The other warriors in the air were also trying to find suitable landing spots, and constantly jumped down too. Let's go. Ta told Xiaoxuan to follow. This time, he let go of Xiaoxuan. But since he promised the shaman that he would bring Xiaoxuan back safe and sound, he needed to keep an eye on him all the time. Guard the surroundings and react quickly. Ta reminded him. Okay. Xiaoxuan followed behind Ta, jumping down to other leaves beneath them. They had to move from the top to the bottom, while being careful not to slip and fall. Only the top 1/3 of the plant was covered by leaves, and the other 2/3 of the plant was only a thick stem. Ta slowed down on purpose, and Xiaoxuan closely followed him, sliding down along the stem. It was not as bright near the ground as it was on the top. There were too many plants and the dense branches blocked most of the sunlight. Only some of the sunlight reached the ground. Apparently the lower part was more shady and cool, but the light was enough for Xiaoxuan to clearly see the surroundings. Xiaoxuan had a feeling that he became smaller in here, or in other words, the world became larger in size. He had seen a lot of ancient trees and big ferocious beasts during his last hunting trip, but he did not feel himself to be as small like now. Even the mushrooms were the size of cabins. How could anyone not feel small? Ta whistled, with his back closely leaning against the stem of the plant. It was a signal for the warriors in the advance group to come together. Unlike other deer-like or bird-like whistles of the other hunting groups, the whistle was lower in tone. It was especially designed for this place. Soon enough, similar whistle sounds came from afar. It was hard to capture if you didn't pay enough attention. Xiaoxuan looked aside, and found some thin straw-like vine stretching towards him rapidly. Xiaoxuan and Ta both stood in the direction it was moving towards, but Xiaoxuan had a clear instinct that those vines were targeting him and him only. Whoosh! A small stone knife stabbed the ground, after it had chopped down the tip of the stretching vine. Immediately the vine stopped stretching towards them, and instead of moving forward, it quickly withdrew as if being scared. Ta went over to retrieve the stone knife as he said to Xiaoxuan, "Do not treat them as lifeless objects, or you will be the one who is dead. Also, most of them know a thing or two about attacking the weak and keeping away from the strong. You are the weakest warrior in our group." Terrific. Now he was the target again. In the mountain forests, ferocious beasts would attack the children of other species, while in here, even plants knew the rules to attack the weak and keep away from the strong. Xiaoxuan had heard from others in his last life that even plants had the 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste and touch. It's just most people did not pay attention to that. While now, Xiaoxuan had a deep understanding about the amplified 5 senses of plants. Soon, warriors that had landed in different spots gathered together. After a quick head count, Ta ordered them to go on. This time, they were divided into 2 smaller groups, and they split up to finish the tasks assigned by the shaman. So, there were only 20 warriors in Xiaoxuan's group. It was impossible for the warriors in the advance group to know every inch of the land, given that it was such a vast green area. However, they knew how to identify the directions. As long as there was sunlight, they wouldn't get lost as the route was basically unchanged. The sounds of birds and insect could be heard in the woods. Also, there were various sounds made by some plants. Some of them sounded like knockings on a door, and the sound echoed in the woods. Some sound would even make Xiaoxuan think of the rotation of an iron head wedged on a mast. And I totally didn't write incest on purpose there. Xiaoxuan saw many kinds of dangerous and even lethal plants as he followed Ta while running through the woods. 1 second earlier it was all quiet and calm, while a second later it was a blood-soaked scene. Xiaoxuan had once seen a plant hunt. Its originally smooth leaves could rapidly turn into saws and blades, and chop down the animals or plants in its territory into pieces. It would bury their remains into the ground, so as to provide the nutrition it needed to grow. Some plants would even eat the meat directly. There were some like the Drosera or Nepenthes that Xiaoxuan had seen in his last life. Some of the plants turned out to be more ferocious, and they would attack aggressively. Warriors in the advance group would normally try to avoid them. They were not easy to mess with. Let's take a break. Tuo and Kiki, you two go fetch some water, Ta said after a half-day's march. The thing required by the shaman was not around here, and they had to keep running for some time to get there. There was no river or stream nearby. As Xiaoxuan was confused about Ta's command, he saw Tuo and Kiki go to a plant with thick leaves. They slashed on the stem with their stone swords, and they finally made a thin crack after quite a few strikes. The outer layer of the stem was very thick. The crack would be too thin if they only struck once, and it would soon heal its wound. Light green liquid poured out from the crack, with a pale sweet fragrance. Tuo and Kiki used some containers to collect the liquid. That liquid would attract other insects. Aside from Xiaoxuan and Tuo and Kiki who were collecting the liquid, the others were guarding against the approaching insects. Every insect who came could only die here. Some of the warriors guarded for the sky, while others guarded the other directions in the woods. With the deployed guarding formation, only 2 warriors were spared to collect the water eventually. Toss me your container, Xuan, Tuo said as he collected the liquid. Tuo did not ask Xiaoxuan to approach that plant, so he stayed at the place about 10 meters away. At Tuo's words, Xiaoxuan tossed him the emptied gourd. When it was filled, Tuo tossed the gourd back to Xiaoxuan and continued to fill in the other container that the next warrior tossed him. The light green liquid attracted many insects, and most of them were pretty large. Any random bug was over a meter long. Hurry! Ta rushed them. Afar, there were a bunch of bugs flying towards their direction. With only 20 of them, they could not fight against those bugs. When the last container was filled, that group of bugs was about 200 meters away from them. It was enough for them to leave. Go. Naturally they left since they were done with the filling. What are they? After considerable distance, Xiaoxuan asked as they were standing on a leaf, resting. We call them the tearers. You see the plant that provided us water earlier. Its wound would soon be healed, and there would be no more crack. The liquid that poured out would be soon reabsorbed and protected by a thick layer. Most insects could do nothing about it. They would leave if there was no more fragrance distributed. However, the tearers are no normal insects. That plant will probably die since there are tearers approaching, Tuo said. The insect called the terror was some creature that was worthy of its name. It had sharp forelimbs like blades to use for tearing. It was a bug that dieted on both meat and plants. The liquid of plants and the blood of animals were both delicacies for the tearers, and they often went in groups. Warriors in the advance group did not wish to confront the tearers. One reason was that the tearers were too lethal, while the other reason was that they stank. The disgusting smell wouldn't fade even after they finished the hunting mission if they were stained with it. Like and subscribe.